boxes, actually. If you'd please put your email so we can include you on our email list, you can find out when we are having our events and be notified about what's going on. Should I just get started? Richard, why don't you come up and introduce Larry?
First of all, did everybody get an opportunity to get a raffle ticket? Okay, good. Anybody comes in, we're going to raffle off 25. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is being recorded, right? Okay. But please donate, okay? We are going to raffle off 25 gold back. There'll be #1 denominations, which are, what are they trading today at, Larry? About $6.50? Right around $6.50 a piece. I got to tell you, you know, when I bought into this a little over a year ago, it was about, I think when I first met you, Larry, it was probably in February, I think, of 2024. You did a little home presentation that I attended down in Orem, Utah, and I got involved right after that, and they were going for about $4.24. So that's a significant increase over a year and a couple of months. So Larry will talk a little bit about that, I hope. We should have some time. I would like you to consider, if you have any kind of questions, to please write those down and ask Larry, because this gentleman here knows what's going on in our state in regard to gold and silver laws. He's been involved in all of them. I'm going to go ahead and read just a little bit of his bio, and I had to kind of parse it down because it's quite extensive, and we'd be here for quite a bit of time if I read the whole thing. So this is Mr. Larry Hilton, who's going to be addressing us tonight. We're happy to have him. We're grateful that he was able to carve out the time and come and present to us tonight on this very important topic of gold and silver, of making our currency backed again by something of value, not just paper, and gold and silver does that. Mr. Hilton holds both a Juris Doctorate and Masters of Business Administration degrees from Brigham Young University. Admitted to both the Utah and California Bar Associations, he has practiced in areas of insurance coverage and defense, commercial litigation, business formation, estate planning, bankruptcy, and constitutional law for more than 35 years. In 1998, Mr. Hilton founded Dominion Insurance Services and has since developed innovation insurance programs for professional associations around the country. He has spoken and written widely on insurance and risk management topics, holds insurance licenses in all 50 states, and is a tribunalized cover holder with Lloyd's of London. Beginning in 2009, Mr. Hilton conceptualized, drafted, and then shepherded, I cannot say that word. When I get stuck on a word, I don't get it right, so sorry about that. Through the Utah legislature, the Specie Legal Tender Act, which was passed into law in 2011, with important amendments adopted during the 2012 session. By that statute, Utah became the first state in more than 100 years to formally recognize gold and silver coinage as legal tender. Since then, he has actively championed monetary reform measures not only in Utah, but in Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Idaho, Louisiana, Montana, Nevada, Oklahoma, Texas, and Wyoming, with over half a dozen states all having adopted meaningful specie legal tender legislation. Mr. Hilton formed Citizens for Sound Money in 2010 and the Utah Monetary Summit in 2011, which is the first year was attended by participants from more than a dozen U.S. states and a half a dozen countries. In 2013, he co-founded the United Precious Metals Association, also known as the UPMA, to promote the commercial framework necessary to implement Utah's new monetary system. Mr. Hilton was invited to sit on the Arizona House Ad Hoc Committee on Gold Bonds. In that role, he helped draft the committee's final report, which was issued in December 2016. He currently serves on the Gold Standard Standard, now Advisory Board of the American Principles in Action, a Washington, D.C.-based public policy think tank, and as General Counsel for UPMA, Goldback Inc., Quintric Business Trust, Goldtinium Holdings Inc., Havilah Homes Inc., and the Celtic Heritage Society, as well as serving as the executor of the Royal Court of Rafine. Did I say that right? Okay. I won't get that right either. Once I get hung up on a word, I'm done. We are very grateful again to have Larry here. We'll turn the time over to him. Please have questions for him. This is a great opportunity to learn. Larry.
Well, thank you all for taking time to come out on Memorial Day weekend, and hopefully this will be worth your time. It's good to see some familiar faces, including birthday girl over here. So, sure. Is that okay? Yeah. I can just hold it like that. Okay. So I would like to talk to you today about, and I've done this before, so apologies to those that have seen it before, but I'd like to talk to you about a pair of dimes, okay? I'm holding two dimes here, and you may recall this demonstration. So one of these is not like the other. Can you see the difference here? What's the difference between those two dimes? One's a little dull, right? Well, another one's shiny. So this one, the shiny one, was minted in 1964, and it contains silver. And this one is base metal coinage. So if you just saw these, in a cash drawer or something, you just would think that they're the same. But today, this one has sufficient value to buy a loaf of, special artisan bread, whereas this one you couldn't even get a slice of Wonder Bread. So the question is, why that disparity? Why do we have two different dimes? And so what I'm hoping is today, someone listening to this may have a paradigm or paradigm shift in their thinking when they think about money and about the different monetary options that are available to each of us as U.S. citizens. Because we actually have, and we're going to talk about America's hidden gold standard, that there is a gold standard that each and every one of you can embrace today and put yourself back on the sound money track. So let's go to I'd like to just kind of review some of the historical information about our monetary system. So if we go all the way back to the colonial stage, we think of fiat currency or paper money as being this great innovation of the 20th century. Actually, back in the 1690s, they had, bills of credit. So for almost 100 years, they had this leading up to the American Revolution. So the important thing to bear in mind is that the founders of our nation were very familiar with fiat currency and how that worked. Let's look at the next slide. So during the Revolutionary War, we had what was called the Continental Dollar that was authorized by the Continental Congress, and we experienced a 5,000% hyperinflation during that period. That's what they funded. That was over an 8-year period. Hence the phrase "not worth a continental" was given rise, and it was really only through the bringing hard money to the soldiers. I think it was John Hancock who showed up to George Washington with a big chest of silver, and that's what kept the Army funded so that we're where we are today. We owe it to good, solid, sound money. Let's go to the next slide. So we had the Articles of Confederation. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, every state was able to make their own money. And you had this tension in our newly formed republic, where you had, like in Rhode Island, they were saying that people from outside the state, outside merchants had to accept their local money, but that inside they didn't have to, you know, and so you had these fights in Shays' Rebellion, which was largely over monetary issues. They came to arms. So a lot of what actually drove us to the Constitutional Convention was monetary policy. A lot of people don't kind of understand that, but it was really trying to solve some problems related to the monetary state of affairs. Let's go to the next slide. So there was at the time circulating in the U.S. A dollar. So the dollar predated the Constitution. When people talked about the dollar, they were thinking of the Spanish milled dollar, but it was a certain weight of silver. Let's go to the next slide. And so when the Constitution was adopted, there were some monetary checks and balances that were put in place. One was that Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and to fix the standards of weight and measures. But states also had an important role. No state was to coin money, emit bills of credit, or make anything but gold or silver coin a tender for payment of debts. That's really interesting. So that is a prohibition that is actually a reservation of a power to the states to make nothing but gold or silver coin a tender for payment of debts. Let's go to the next slide. So in the Coinage Act of 1792, there's some really interesting provisions that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first one was that they set up, or the founders set up a bimetallic system. So we have silver and gold. So you have the silver dollar, and then they had the gold eagle, and there was an exact exchange rate that was set between the two. The other was that they had what they called the free coinage provision. So you could show up with your gold or silver in any form whatsoever, hand it to the Treasury, they would mint it into coin and give it back to you, so you could go buy your groceries. Yes, Mr. Hilton. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the comment here, very apropos, is that is one of the fundamental functions of government, is to put into circulation the gold and silver holdings of the people so that it can circulate and they can buy their groceries and do right. And that's what that stamp means, is that the stamp is saying this is the weight and purity, you know, of the coinage. Another provision that was very interesting was that debasing the coinage, so that would be, you know, shaving off or mixing an alloy or that was not approved, was a capital offense punishable by death. Okay? I want you just to let that sink in again. Debasing the value of the money. That is now the standard operating procedure. In fact, Congress and the Federal Reserve, their goal is to achieve 2% inflation every year, and they are meeting and exceeding their goal. Yes, question in the back. Okay, they're debasing the currency as opposed to the money. Okay, so if we have, you know, sound currency available, which we do, and that is in the form of, we'll get to this, to, you know, U.S. silver dollar, then you can see the evidence of that debasement of the Federal Reserve note against this as this goes up in value over time. And then finally, just the various values. Let's go to the next slide. So I think it was James Madison, who's the father of the Constitution. He was asked, you know, so does this mean that we're on a pure gold and silver standard? And I think it was in the Federalist Papers, he talked about how we have the option to, in times of exigent circumstances, to depart from a precious metal standard. And so we did that historically during the War of 1812, during the Civil War, of course, during the Revolutionary War. We did resort to a fiat currency or a paper currency. During the Civil War, we had the greenback, and again, hyperinflation during that period of time. But it was the other option was the Rothschilds showed up. And they said, "Hey, we'll print money for you, and we'll back it, and so forth, and it'll only be 30% interest." And Lincoln said, "No, we'll just print our own." Greenbacks. But it did raise, there was a lot of litigation post-Civil War called the legal tender cases that kind of went through, okay, well, when do we have to actually accept this stuff? If we go then past the Civil War, after we have the reinstatement of precious metal legal tender following the Civil War, we had a period of time during which you had kind of gold and silver kind of fighting. Maybe some of you remember William Jennings Bryan, the politician who gave the keynote speech at the Democratic Convention, and he gave his famous Cross of Gold speech where he said, "You shall not press down on the brow of labor the crown of thorns. You should not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." And what he was really talking about was this bimetallic system that we have, silver and gold, where gold was trying to replace silver. And this really goes to the issue of, that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, choice in currency, having options. So when you go to engage in some kind of financial transaction or to, buy your groceries, buy a house, whatever, being able to pick the right monetary tool for the job, having choice in currency, and that's what that was really about. Let's go to the next one. So you kind of had this tension between labor and capital, bankers and farmers, basically, represented in some of the literature. Wizard of Oz. You have the yellow brick road going to Oz, which is the representation of Washington, D.C., and Dorothy actually had, in the original book, silver slippers, not ruby slippers. And so the idea was, hey, you got the solution with you. And that's what we want to talk about today, is what solutions are available to you to kind of address monetary malaise. Okay, then we get to the gold confiscation under FDR. And that was something that is a sad chapter in our history. There was only a very short period of time throughout our entire history that we've not had some precious metal. Gold went out of circulation much sooner than silver did. But this, right after that confiscation, you'd have the fireside chats, and basically the president, Roosevelt, would essentially set the price of gold. So he took everybody's gold, and then he increased the value of gold and devalued the money that he had given everybody, stole everybody's gold, right? Now, a lot of people, it found its way into basements and collections and so forth, and then it kind of popped out, in the 1970s. But there was, at the time, there was a economic advisor, John Maynard Keynes, who made the infamous statement that there is no subtler nor surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. The process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. And so by substituting the paper currency that costs very little to produce for a precious metal currency and saying, hey, they're really the same, that's the trick that he's talking about, that not one man in a million would be able to diagnose. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Say again, yes.
When they sold it to us was that you were supposed to be able to take the green paper and exchange it for gold.
That's right. Redeemable on demand to bearer, yes.
Until when? Do you remember the date?
I think that was 1971.
Yes.
1971. We'll get to that, where the redeemability of gold. Okay, so what happened as we moved away from the gold standard. This illustrates the purchasing power of the dollar. And so you can see those little blips, 1812, Civil War, World War I. These are times that we went off a precious metal standard, and so we had inflation as a result. But the very interesting thing is look how flat that line is. Do we have any Jane Austen fans here? Fred? So, Mr. Darcy, right, was a very wealthy, figure. And he was presented by the author Jane Austen to be one of immense wealth because he had an income of 5,000 pounds per year. And at the time that that was written by Jane Austen, that was a jaw-dropping income. 200 years later, under the Anglo-American gold standard, it was still a jaw-dropping number. Basically, you could take your silver dollars and your gold dollars, you can still do this today, stick it under your mattress, go to sleep like Rip Van Winkle, wake up 100 years later, pull it out, and you can buy the same amount of goods and services as you could 100 years before. And so that's kind of what this illustrates. Then, of course, we had Kennedy, who attempted to put redeemable silver certificates to and kind of diminish the role of the Federal Reserve. But immediately following his assassination, we had the Coinage Act of 1965, by which Lyndon B. Johnson stood in front of Congress and said, "I've got really bad news. We're out of silver. There's not enough silver for us to continue to produce these coins, so we're going to give you the base metal stuff." And so from 1965, there was a couple of coins that were produced thereafter for just a year that had 40% gold. But from that point until 1985, let's not jump there quite yet. Let's go to Nixon. So we have this period of time during which no precious metal coinage is being produced at all. So we'll just call that 1965 all the way to 1985. But really, there was a little bit of silver up to 1970. So it's either a 20-year or a 15-year period out of our entire history that we were not producing precious metal legal tender coin. Then you had Nixon in 1971, who took us off that stopped the redeemability of gold for U.S. dollars. And really, it only existed at that time for foreigners. It wasn't available to the U.S. But he essentially broke the promise that was made at Bretton Woods, that the U.S. dollar would always be as good as gold. So let's see what happened in the wake of the Nixon shock. So that little arrow here shows 1971. So here's your cumulative inflation since that date. Let's go to the next screen. Here is the growth in productivity and hourly consumption, flattening out. So productivity is going, and compensation. So compensation stalled from that point going forward. People made less and less in terms of purchasing power. Consumer price index, if you go to the next slide, skyrocketed. Next, I like this slide. This is the cost of a can of Campbell's soup from 1971 on. So you could buy Campbell's soup with this. Still can today. But let's go to the next one. Real house prices skyrocketed. And rents. Go to the next slide. How many years you have to save up to be able to buy a house, the average person. Next slide. Home value change versus income change. The next slide, you've got the median age of first marriage. It's going way up because it was hard to afford to get married. Children per woman dropped off. If you go to the next one. Number of dual income households grew incredibly. Number of inmates incarcerated under the federal system skyrocketed. Next slide, currency crashes. This is amazing. Look at that. Look at all the currency crashes since 1971. And then national health expenses. So we got poorer and sicker since 1971, and major currency crashes again if you go to the next slide on this. So this is the Nixon shock. And we're still feeling the shock waves today. Okay, and then I guess here are the trade imbalance that we hear a lot about. We're going back to tariffs. If you want to go to the next slide, you see we were a net exporter before then, and we became a importer. Okay, and the national debt, of course, skyrocketed. This is the last slide of this series. So there's our national debt. Okay, so in 1974, we had, under Gerald Ford, the reauthorization of gold ownership. FDR had made it illegal for Americans to own gold. And so that was from 1933 all the way to 1974. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, but I remember right about that time, I was in high school, and my dad called me and he said, hey, let me show you what I got in my closet here. And he came out and he had a couple of stacks of Krugerrands. And, so there were a lot of early adopters that, hey, we can own gold now. And the gold price, went through the roof because of the artificial gold price. I think it was $40 an ounce by then. And then it shot up to, in the hundreds of dollars. Let's go to the next slide. Then in 1977, so we've hit the nadir and we're just kind of coming back. We're seeing this resurgence in U.S. policy. So the reinstatement of gold clause contracts. So it used to be that, if you contracted any kind of dollar, people could pay in whatever kind of dollar they chose. Under the reinstatement of the gold clause contract, people could actually contractually require payment in a certain type of dollar, certain type. Very important for what we're going to talk about here. And then 1985, go to that, we had the restoration of U.S. gold and silver coin mintage, and that was under Reagan. So do you remember 1985, anybody here, when that came to be?
Comment?
Yes, please, in the back.
You mentioned that coin was a coin of the United States. It's not a coin of the United States, corporation. Every one of those coins say United States of America, which is our country. And so do those gold coins. You look at the back and they all say United States of America, not United States.
Okay. United States of America. Okay, very good.
Because 8 U.S.C. 3215 defines the United States as a federal corporation. It was created on 21st of February, 1871.
Okay, post-Civil War. Thanks. I didn't want to go right down that rabbit hole, but that is a good point. That is, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, let me tell you about our, so UPMA, one of our directors back in 1985, when gold and silver was minted again by the U.S. Treasury, and I'll just refer to them both kind of as U.S. or United States, he decided, I'm going to put myself on my own gold standard. I'm going to live the rest of my life spending nothing but gold and silver coin. And he actually did that until he died just a few years ago. And he had the opportunity to visit with the IRS regarding this decision. And he was in D.C. for an appearance before the United States Supreme Court on some issues relating to how he was keeping his taxes. And he had the opportunity to talk with Donald Regan, who was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of the Treasury. And he said, hey, what was the point? Why did you guys, reinstate this? What was the policy strategy behind that? And Donald Reagan's response really surprised him. So let's go to the next slide. And this is what I've called Ronald Reagan's golden rule, Reagan's golden rule. So this is what it says in 31 U.S.C. 5116. Amounts received from the sale of gold shall be deposited by the Secretary in the General Fund of the Treasury and shall be used for the sole purpose of reducing the national debt. So the concept, as explained by the then Secretary of the Treasury, was that they wanted to give Americans the ability to move from a full faith and credit or debt system. So this is a debt instrument. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States to a sound money system. So the idea was, as those people adopted this would ultimately go out of circulation, or that they would have a choice. Now here we are, 45 years later, and we haven't seen, or 50 years later, and we haven't seen that change yet. But these are the silver shoes that Dorothy had, that is available to each and every American citizen. So, so as legal tender today, how many different types of dollars do we have? Any guesses? How many different types of dollars would you say? Let's go. So we've got, this is not really a dollar. It's a Federal Reserve note that is exchangeable for lawful money. But we'll just call that colloquially the fiat dollar, okay? Then you got the silver dollar. You have the gold dollar. And there's also a platinum and a palladium dollar. You have the base metal dollar, to which the Federal Reserve note is pegged in value. So these two are joined at the hip. But all the others have a different purchasing power in today's market. And the interesting thing is that statutorily, if you go to the next slide, the Secretary of the Treasury is required by law to maintain the equal purchasing power of each kind of United States currency. So there's several laws. I guess my message is we have good laws at the federal level and improving laws at the state level supporting sound money. A lot of them aren't followed. And so, you know, are we taking all proceeds from the sale of gold to pay down the national debt? No. Mike Lee went in back in 2011. I was talking with him. He said, well, I'll go talk to the Secretary of the Treasury. He had no idea that that was even an obligation of his office to maintain the equal purchasing power. So let's now go to kind of some more pragmatic considerations. So if we go to the next slide, we look at, you know, what makes up good money, right? So you have what we call kind of monetary friction. We're going to touch on a number of these. So you have debasement of the currency, which is disguised as gain. So everybody's all excited about how their homes are going up in value. Really, the dollar is going down in value. It's the same house that you've always had. Reduced transactional finality. You know, when you do a transaction, you can get a chargeback. They undo things. I mean, there are so many small businesses that are going under because they just get going, and then all of a sudden, a big sale is reversed, and it just kills them. Low financial confidentiality, social engineering, coercion, where, you know, with credit cards, they tell you what you can and cannot buy. And this truly exists here in this country, but even to a greater degree overseas, like in China, they'll actually not run your card if they figure that if you're a certain body weight and you've had too many meals that day. They say, no, you have enough, you know, you can't buy any more food. So, and then you have the potential of systemic failure. So with our, you know, the whole idea of this electronic currency is, you know, somebody's got the kill switch, right? They can turn off your bank account, they can turn off your money. When you have a physical currency, that's really a hallmark of true liberty, is the ability to have a physical currency that you can exchange without Big Brother looking over your shoulder about what you're buying and so forth. So anyway, there's a number of factors here. So let's first talk, as we talk about kind of how you can manage your own gold standard, silver standard, whatever. There's a couple of things, if we go to the next slide, that I want to make you aware of. These are what I refer to as bullion booby traps. So you've got silver coins. This is a United States of America minted silver coin, which is legal tender under 30 lawful money, right? And so this is something that you can use for the purchase of goods and services, no problem. But you'll see many silver coins or silver rounds that are not stamped by the U.S., they're not minted by the U.S. So if you go down to the second point here, the criminal liability, this is current law. Whoever, except as authorized by law, makes or utters or passes or attempts to utter or pass any coins of gold or silver or other metal or alloys of metals intended for use as current money, whether in the resemblance of coins of the United States or foreign coins or of original design, shall be fined under this title or in prison not more than 5 years. So actually using something that is not U.S. minted coin to buy your groceries under federal law is a felony. And you can be sent to prison. And there have been people that have been indicted, prosecuted, convicted, and sent to prison for passing non-legal tender coin. So we're going to talk about how you kind of circumvent that. And then you also have the capital gains liability. So you can spend this all day without having to report capital gains. But if you use gold or silver other than U.S. minted coin, now you're in the barter realm, and you're supposed to calculate, you're supposed to determine how much did I acquire this for before I bought the loaf of bread? What was the gain that I, realized when I bought the loaf of bread? So then everybody becomes a, tax cheat in the eyes of the government if they're using gold or silver coin to, or really any property. If you're doing barter transactions, you can be prosecuted for that. So these are two, what I call bullion booby traps. So you have the capital gains. So there's a 28%, the highest capital gains possible applies to gold and silver, but there's 4 important exceptions. And one is U.S. minted coin. And let's see, let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of that capital gains booby trap that we were talking about. So just imagine you bought a house in 1957, you sold it in 2007. And you bought it for, what is that, 13,500 silver dollars. You sell it 50 years later for the same amount. And yet, according to your paper currency, you've realized $167,000 capital gain, which is taxable. So the question is, when we go back to our choice in currency, and you're figuring out, okay, I've got a monetary choice here. If I'm going to buy a house and I want to establish a tax basis in that, do I want to use this or do I want to use this? Because if you buy a house for 13,500 silver dollars, U.S. minted coin, and you sell it for 13,500 silver dollars, there's no capital gain there. And this is the inflation tax that John Maynard Keynes talked about, and also maybe you remember during the 2008 presidential election, you had Ron Paul who was talking about the inflation tax. That's what got me going, thinking about, hey, what's the solution for this? And it was shortly after that that we started working on the Utah Legal Tender Act. Let's go to the next slide. Another thing is, if you have gold or silver and you have the choice, there's some vendors that are promoting things where you sell your gold or silver and then you take the paper dollar proceeds and you buy your groceries. Well, you've just had a capital gain, right? There's some pretty big groups out there that will give you a credit card and they say, hey, we'll just sell it in real time and so forth, and they try to send you a report at the end of the year saying this is your capital gain. Better way to do it is to take a loan against your gold or silver. If you really have to transact in the paper dollars, take a loan against this, and then you repay the loan at a time, and then you don't have a taxable event. Let's go to the next. Now, the one booby trap we were talking about was unless otherwise authorized by law, anyone who utters or passes gold or silver coin, even of original design, is violating, is guilty of a felony. So there are some innovative things out there. Mention was made of the gold back. So the gold back under, is set up as a, let's go back one slide, is actually issued under, as a negotiable instrument under the Uniform Commercial Code. So that is authorized by law. Now this negotiable instrument happens to be composed of gold. So it's a negotiable instrument written on gold, but it is authorized by law. So this is one workaround to the idea of, let me pull out some gold backs here. So here's a variety of gold backs, and you'll see that it actually says here, do you have good eyes? Okay, so yeah, what is the small? Yeah. Negotiable instrument. Specie legal tender negotiable instrument. So these are designed with the idea of working within the existing legal framework. So it's important to understand, because there's pretty high stakes, for what's going on here, what the monetary laws are, and to establish your precious metal life, within that. So let's move to the next slide. So one thing, like with the gold, now it's very interesting. You look at, so the United States of America meant only one denomination of the silver dollar. The gold dollar, they have several denominations, but the interesting thing is they're not priced interchangeably. So if you go, if a gold bank existed and you went in, you gave them a $50 gold coin, you say, hey, I'd like to take my change in, $10 coins, they would actually say, oh, okay, well, we can't give you 10 or 5 $10 coins, because we're going to have to just give you 4 and then a little bit of change, because they have a different premium on them. So they're not actually, the U.S. Mint isn't circulating these in the way that you would expect of money, where different denominations are interchangeable. With goldbacks, for example, that was a problem they set out to solve, is to have the interchangeability, so that you can have 10 goldbacks and exchange that for 10 goldbacks and exchange that for 10 singles. So this is just an idea of some of the things that are going on today. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, anti-counterfeiting. So basically what we're talking about is this monetary friction and some of the developments that are out there to do that. So let's go to the next slide. So this takes us back to that idea of intelligent choice in currency, picking which currency works for you. So for example, if you're going to take a loan out, which currency would you want to have your loan denominated in? Probably in the paper currency, because this is going to drop like crazy, and so your actual debt is just going away with the passage of time. That's why we are a nation of debtors, and why our nation is the biggest debtor on the planet, because we have a currency that encourages indebtedness and is a debt instrument itself. So before this came out, we were savers. Everything was funded through capital, not through credit. And so it's really changed kind of the whole way that we think about money and the economy and all of that. So let's go to the next slide. This just kind of goes through the monetary friction, problem, solution, and how the different currencies stack up. Okay, Next thing I want to talk to you about is if you decide to put yourself on your own gold standard. So let's say you say, okay, I'm going to use silver dollars. I'm going to use gold dollars. I'm going to use gold backs. I'm going to use, these different things. How do you calculate and pay your taxes on that? That's kind of a bit of a worry, As if and there's been people that said, for example, David Margrave, the one who was on our board, he did his tax returns in silver dollars. And so he said, what was your income? Well, my income was $4,000, And that's one of the things that he had a little conversation with the IRS about. But so what you have, but what he did is he paid his taxes in silver dollars, did it for 30 years. He lived in California, but the IRS told him, go ahead and pay your taxes in Ogden, Utah. That's the place where you need to give them your silver dollars, and they accepted him. The state of California accepted him because under federal law, this is legal tender for the payment of taxes. They couldn't turn him away. So he did that. He declared his $4,000. He didn't claim any exemptions, and he ended up in the lowest tax bracket, but he'd pay a 10% tax every year for 30 years, and with full knowledge of the. Now, some people will conflate the two, and those guys have really gotten in trouble. Like Bobby Kerr down in Nevada, his people would take their payment in silver at this one window, step over here, change it in for paper dollars. They declared this and spend that, and that was found to be a scam, and they were, and he's, I think, still in prison over that. So you want to make sure that you do it right, that you declare everything. So there's an interesting law called the Qualified Business Unit that recognizes what are called, if we go to the next slide, certain kinds of structures, corporations, partnerships, and trusts can qualify as being a QBU, a Qualified Business Unit, which is defined as a business activity, and it doesn't even have to be a separate LLC or a separate corporation. It can just be an area of business activity, of, let's say, a corporation that is conducted within an economic zone that uses a currency other than the U.S. Federal Reserve note dollar. And so what this allows, if we go to the next slide, is for a qualified business unit to declare a functional currency. So I'll give the example that I'm familiar with. So the UPMA, United Precious Metals Association, they offer accounts, and every account is a revocable trust. So when you start the account, you have a trust. And you hold your gold and silver in it. You can even, if you want, you can move your house into it or whatever. And then within the trust, you can interact with other UPMA members, buying goods and services and so forth. And so that kind of becomes, so that's the environment within which you're operating, and you have a qualified business unit with a functional currency of the gold or silver dollar. You can conduct business operations within that. One thing that's available is gold or silver leasing, where you can take a piece of your currency and you can actually lease it out for a return. So now you're kind of a business, you have income, and you can set up leases here. If you go to the next slide, go on the website, you set up a lease and you're in business. And then you can also take business expenses against that income because you're your QBU. And the interesting thing is, let's go to the next slide. And this shows how you can transact with other members of the UPMA for goods and services. And let's go to the next slide. And then you get to the idea of, so how do you report this on taxes? and it's a really cool system. So this is set up for multinational corporations, really, is the way that this came into being. So a QBU keeps its books and records in its functional currency, and then it figures out if it has a profit or loss. And it takes that number of the profit or loss, and it translates it using the average exchange rate between these two currencies for the year. You translate it, you get the number, if it's a profit or loss, you take that number and you plug it in to your return. One number goes right into your other income, and you've translated it to US dollars. So it's very simple. It is provided under federal tax law. If you go to the next slide, UPMA provides an annual statement that kind of explains this. You can share with your tax advisor. So what is going on? Let's go to the next slide. What is going on with this sound money reform effort nationwide? So as was mentioned, Utah became in 2011 the first state in over 100 years to formally recognize gold and silver as legal tender. Since that time, we've had quite a few different states that have followed suit. What do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different states that have adopted some level of what Utah did. In fact, Florida, just a month or two ago, eclipsed anything that we had done here, establishing a system whereby the state would actually accept gold and silver coin for payment of taxes and so forth, and also setting it up so that licensed money transmitters within the state would be able to facilitate transactions between people. So we are really moving into the golden age, right? Isn't that what one of our prominent leaders likes to talk about? America is entering its golden age. So, I think that you should take some pride or recognition in the fact that this kind of started here. 2011. We talked about that a little bit, and it's spreading because truth and liberty is contagious, and as people become aware of their options, they want to embrace that liberty. And I would encourage each of you to consider doing that. If you want to go to the next slide, appreciate your time and your consideration. And now if you go to the final slide, be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Okay, so I asked Richard this question, and I was wondering, so my income, if I have it go into the UPMA account, and do they have like a debit card that you use to? So I'm wondering, should I pay my bills that way? Like, should I put it into my UPMA account and then pay my house bill with that debit card?
Yeah. So good question. So if you want to put yourself on a kind of a gold standard, that would be like a good initial step. Is you're going to take your income, you're going to pay your regular taxes on that income. So that's post-tax money that comes in. And now any transactions that you do with UPMA members, you can do in the gold or silver money itself. You don't have to go back out to the paper dollars to do those transactions, but the utility company and others that haven't reached that point yet, you're going to need to, change back in. And so you can do it through that card. You can do it through that Goldilocks gold equity line of credit, where you can borrow against your gold or silver, and then you can transact within the fiat, debt-based system, and then retreat back into your gold haven. So I think that's a really good idea. Now, some people, like for example, I get a fair amount of my income just directly in gold. I just mentioned that I serve as general counsel for a number of institutions. They just pay me in gold. So I have that gold income, and I've got a qualified business unit where the gold income comes in. I have some expenses that I pay in gold and silver, and I go through that exercise to calculate my profit or loss at the end of the year, and then that just plugs into my regular tax return after it's translated. Yeah, here's a question.
Do you think that it's going to be all digital currency in the next couple of years? You do?
Yeah, we are definitely moving toward the digital currency. I mean, maybe some of you heard with the developments in Ukraine, where it looked like, hey, maybe that war is going to end. So within hours, the European Central Bank says, well, we're going to have to crack down on gold ownership and move to a full digital system, because as they see their system kind of coming down, the only way to kind of keep us all in thrall is to get rid of these options. We have to, so it really is a very severe and troubling form of bondage that we're under with our monetary system. Yes, Mr. Hilton.
So the gold bill that's pushed by, I think, the Austrian Economic Group, are you familiar with that? So what happens, like in 90 days, whatever your paper is returns to gold in value. How's that differ from what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm 100%. So it's a 90%, so it's a... Okay. Mm-hmm. So the gold,
but in 90 days, well, in 1800s, and when it matured to 90 days, it had to be turned into gold.
Yeah, okay, so it was, well, we took, so you take the paper out of the equation, and you just say, here's the gold. So we actually deal in the real stuff. Now, UPMA and a variety of other, what I would call exchanges, do provide for electronic transaction between members, and that's what I was showing up there. So there is an electronic element to it that is, for convenience under certain circumstances, especially when you're dealing online or whatever. But you never want to lose the physical option. The physical is extremely important. Yes, question in front.
So as far as UPMA with the exchange account members, any exchanges that are made are based on the assets that the management or the association holds. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's a very good question. So in our banking system, we're used to the concept of the fractional reserve. It's a wonderful life. They have the run on the bank. Well, I don't have your money. It's in the Joneses' house, and we lent it out. We don't have your money. So, like the UPMA and some of these other services, the money's there. It's in the vault. So it's 100%. Now, if you choose that you want to lease it out for a return, that's your choice. You can say, okay, I'm going to take a certain portion of my gold or silver. That's the difference, because when you deposit money into a bank, who's the owner of this once it goes in the bank? It's the bank, and you're a creditor, and you're subordinate to their shareholders, okay? Whereas this is held in a trust, so you are always the owner of your gold and silver, even if it's in the vault that's being managed by Alpine Gold. I think there was a question back here, and then I'll come to you.
So if we consider or assume that these payment methods continue indefinitely, and we don't know a date which they'll stop, which one would you say is the most convenient method presently for a household?
the most convenient method, looking at kind of today, would be just what we're currently doing, credit cards and ACHs and so forth. That's been built up over years. So we are all conditioned to that paradigm, We're all living in that paradigm. So this does, I'm not going to lie to you, it takes effort to break out and to move into a new way of operating and looking at things. But unlike David Margrave, you don't have to do it all at once, cold turkey, and say, I'm putting myself in the gold standard, and I'm not going to touch this anymore. Everything's going to be done in this. But you can find, the guy down the street, who will mow your lawn, for this, or get a haircut. If you go to goldback.com, you will find thousands of businesses that accept goldbacks. So you're doing I would say it's kind of almost a good citizen duty to go and actually, find those people and go buy goods. Like the Ace Hardware just down from where I live, they accept goldbacks, and I always go in and buy things for, using the goldbacks, because we're trying to reinstate, we're kind of trying to break the mold. So all of these systems that we're used to, ACH and credit cards and so forth, that can all be backed by this. I mean, all that technology, even today, exists. It's just not as pervasive. It's just not as, and so who's going to do it? It's every one of you with your silver shoes. You got to tap your heels together and say, okay, I'm gonna put away the old and ring in the new, and go from there. I like your answer. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll be to you in just a second.
The convenience is the poison. Okay, I mean, they make it easy for us, but they're leading us down the primrose path where we experience the devaluation of our currency and the inflation. That was not my question. Could you address, how much fiat currency is insured for at the banks, and how much your gold and silver, through the UPMA is insured for, and by who?
Yeah. Right, so you have the FDIC, that insures your holdings up to $250,000. That's credit insurance, okay? And so when we first started down this path, they said, well, what about insurance? What about FDIC coverage? We said, well, it's not needed because there is no credit here, This is the insurance for when there's a run on the bank, when it's a wonderful life and it's a really bad day for you when everybody wants their money out. So the insurance that we have, for example, the holdings at UPMA through Alpine Gold, it's 100% insured for loss, damage, and theft. So with no cap, it's completely insured. I saw a question in the back here.
So why don't they make silverbacks?
Why don't they make silverbacks? They do make silverbacks. It's just the cost of putting them into that form makes it difficult for them to kind of circulate in that form. But really, silver coin is probably, a better medium for silver just because of the value. But with the gold, I mean, this is the first time with the gold back that you've been able to put, they have goldbacks go down as little as 2,000th of an ounce of gold within, that's in the new Florida series. Yes, question here.
In your Wizard of Oz analogy to gold and silver, does its villain, the Wicked Witch of the West, have anything to do with metaphorical symbolism?
The Wicked Witch of the West? Yeah, let's see, I haven't lined up all the people. Maybe that's the Federal Reserve. I'm not 100% sure, who that is. But, yeah. Did you have a guess?
She melts when you pour water.
Oh, she melts.
And the dollar bill melts when you put enough water in it. That's it, exactly. And she's green.
And she's green.
She's green.
can you help me understand, if I transfer my current money for Goldbacks, there's got to be a percentage that I lose, or I have to pay for storage, or if I want to put it into a debit card, there must be a fee of some kind that I pay. How does that structure work, and how much do I have to make it worth my while?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So every form of, precious metals carries a premium on it, right? That's kind of what you're getting at. So different forms have different premiums. So the premium over spot, and when you're talking about spot, you're generally talking for gold 400-ounce bars. So it says, what's the premium on a 400-ounce bar? Well, there is a premium. It's small, but there's a premium over just the raw gold to put it in that form. But a 400-ounce bar versus 1/1000th of an ounce is very different. So this has a close to 100% premium. So this is worth $6, but the gold in it is worth about $3. But the interesting thing when you think about that is that you really don't want, you want to ask what the premium is to understand that, but you want to know, does it maintain its premium? In other words, can I now take this to Ace Hardware and will they accept it at its premium? And they do. So for example, if you had a pile of lumber, right? That lumber, that's going to cost you something, a certain amount. If you had that same amount of lumber in pencils, how much more is that going to cost? There's going to be a premium, right? Because there's a utility factor. It's all wood, but now there's a utility factor, or even tongue depressors, right? So the idea is does the premium maintain itself? And is the gold in here? You can go online and a lot of people have, wondered, is the gold really in there? And Mike Adams, the health ranger, I don't know if any of you listened to him, he did a thing where he melted down a bunch of these, and he said not only is it all there, but actually there's a little bit more than what's advertised in these. So the premium is a factor, and really the question is, what is the market, the purchasing power of this gold in this form? Okay, so there's a number of factors. There's purity, weight, form that determine the value of gold. So.
If I could add on to that, there's also the utility, because if you walk into a store with a gold piece, a 1-ounce gold piece like this, that's trading over $3,000 an ounce now, and you're trying to buy something for $5, how are they going to give you change? And do you want fiat currency for your gold? The answer is going to be no. That's where Goldbacks comes into play, because now you have the utility of a currency that is gold that you can pay for in small amounts. I mean, 1/1000th of an ounce is quite a feat.
So as a fun exercise, I'll leave you, we have a question here, and then I have a little invitation for you.
Kind of going on the same path here. So I'm not a business, and unless I have gold and loan it out and gain, I'm going to just be constantly paying that premium in order to spend Goldbacks elsewhere unless I hoard them and it goes up in value. So how does the common person deal with that expense?
So actually, if you're a UPMA member, this is one of the advantages. You can get Goldbacks at about a 5% discount. So when you get Goldbacks and you go in and you spend them with any of these merchants, you're getting a 5% discount right off the bat. They all accept it at the published rate, but you're actually buying it underneath the published rate. So for the average person, it actually makes sense. You can save 5, and sometimes 5, maybe even 10%, depending on what you picked it up for wherever it's accepted. And then the other question about like vaulting, I think, did you?
Well, the credit card or the debit card.
Yeah.
What's the fee for using that mechanism to transact?
Yeah, so the debit card that UPMA offers, it's $10 a month unless you have holdings of, I think it's 100 gold dollars or more, or if you are growing your account by a certain amount, then it's free. So it's free if you're actually making use of the system. Otherwise, it's $10 a month. Mr. Hilton, what's that? That's in fiat.
So how do you insure against theft? All the others I can understand, but how do you insure against theft?
Yeah, so we carry insurance through Lloyd's of London, and that's what's that? It is, but we up the limits to make sure that we're under that. Was there one more question I saw? Yeah. Familiar face.
Jeff Oster's my name. So I've been dealing with this gold and silver thing for many, many years. I ran in 1992 for state treasurer on the basis of the fact that no state shall make anything but gold or silver a tender in payment of debts. And so I ran for auditor in 2020 and auditor in 2024. I wish you were running for auditor. You probably would have been a better candidate. But the auditor's job really is to let the people know that we as Utah have been violating the Constitution for over 90 years now. Now, that being a constitutional issue, I would just say that your whole thing with goldbacks and what you're doing with UPMA is a major step forward in terms of honoring our constitutional covenant with God. It's not just an issue of getting value, and the fact of the matter is gold is going to go up in price probably to $10,000 an ounce or more in the very near future. But the greater thing to me is this whole Constitution issue. Do we honor God's establishment of this Constitution? As he said, I established this Constitution by the hands of wise men whom I raised up. Okay? And then he said, if you go against this covenant, then you have disobeyed me and violated me in the establishment of the Constitution. So there's a greater value in terms of honor, integrity, to get ourselves back into a gold and silver standard. The mayor of Nauvoo, Illinois, in 1844 ran for president. And he said, we cannot be God's people, and we cannot establish God's Zion or New Jerusalem on a dishonest, fraudulent paper money. If you're coming here, burn your paper money, bring only your gold and silver. That's how important this issue is.
That is that's a really appropriate setup for the invitation that I'd like to give each of you. And this just occurred to me just as we were talking. I would like to invite you to consider putting yourself on a gold or silver standard by identifying someone who you transact with, who might be willing, who you can offer gold or silver to for the payment of goods or services. Whether that's silver dollars, gold backs, whatever, doesn't matter. But to advance this idea of making gold or silver a tender for payment of debts, see if you can start with one person who's your hairdresser, or, the guy who shines your shoes, or you could go to the website and look up the thousands of businesses that actually accept goldbacks. Go out to dinner, go to the hardware store, whatever, and just make it a matter of kind of personal pride and patriotism to say, hey, I am advancing the cause of liberty by engaging in this kind of transaction. I just want to go to the birthday girl real quick. Can we all say happy birthday, please?
Thank you. Last year for Christmas, we gave gold bags to our kids and grandkids, along with some other emergency supplies.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yes.
So I think, I'm trying to, in my mind, with what Stephen said, the compulsion to hoard because of whatever the future might bring, that's the thing that would stop me from doing what you just said. So how do I overcome that? I guess it's selflessness. I don't know.
Yeah, so they call that Gresham's law, right? So bad money drives out good. Hey, if I can buy something with this, why would I want to part with the other? So you need to just kind of adopt a mentality of abundance. There's plenty of gold and silver out there. It's minted by the U.S. government. They're required by law to mint enough to meet public demand. So, but then start a loop. Think about, well, what could I do? What service could I offer for gold or silver? And maybe you're going to be on the receiving end sometimes, and you'll be on the paying end other times. But the other alternative is to take your paper dollars and stick them into a bank where they are losing value and being lent out, and there's a cap on, how much that, so I would say, to me, what makes the most sense, and this is what I've been moving toward in my life, is hold as much as I can in gold and silver, and then convert to paper just when necessary. Right? I can't do the transaction, any other way. So that, having holdings sitting in a bank doesn't, it's just kind of antithetical to what we just heard. And so as long as you have liquidity options that you can get out to the paper dollar when you need to, yes.
But I'm still not seeing, if I want to move to this currency, do I need to get other people to do the same in order to have business with them? Is that how it works? So if I turn my paper money or my bank money and you guys go out and build gold, you go out and buy gold, correct? And then you issue me the gold backs, is that how it works? And then they're issued at a premium.
Yeah, so, he was just talking about the system, because really we're all here as members of a community, right? So it can start here with a community that if you want to pay in gold, you have to have somebody who's willing to accept gold. Well, no, the question is, do they have to be a member of the UPMA? Only for electronic transfers. But, you could go to your neighbor, whoever, you want to transact with, and offer them gold. It's a really fun experience, when you pull out a silver coin or a gold back. Yes, I'm sorry, you've had a question.
So let me boil this down. The value of a gold back is that it contains a certain amount of gold, a troy ounce of gold. 1,000 of troy for a single. You can get 100. You get bigger denominations. And the premium is the cost that it is incurred to make that gold back, inlaying or however you thread it or weave it in. Explain the correlation of the premium to the cost of gold as gold increases. Because the premium should be fixed versus the cost of gold that increases.
Yeah, and that's why, as was stated, the value of gold backs has gone up so much. Because when they first started in 2019, one gold back was $2. It's $6 today, just since 2019. And that's in purchasing power, yeah. So anyway, that's just, that is something to consider. So I'm saying, you know, goldbacks, that's an option, right? And it works because it's a negotiable instrument under all 50 states, and so we're in the safe harbor for citizens. But you can use, you know, silver coins as well. But I would caution you with the bullion rounds and so forth, because then you're getting into an area that is, that if they wanted to do a crackdown, you know, they could. So we don't want to hand the government or the enemies of sound money a club that they can beat us down with. So we want to stay in our safe harbor. But I would just like to, you know, if you want to just kind of think about that and think about, hey, maybe you know, my hairdresser will let me pay her in gold, you know, or maybe, you know, just someone that I deal with, and just make it part of your life to have this gold standard, even if it's just on the side and it's really small, you know. But when you do that, and more and more of you are doing it, and say, hey, I want to transact in gold, then we're moving back to the vision that was so eloquently described for us earlier. So I want to thank you all for being here today, for wanting to you know, give some attention to this really important subject, and the powers within you to put yourself and your neighbors and your community and your state and your nation back on the gold standard. It all starts with having that paradigm shift and saying, hey, we're going to do it. This is not a top-down thing. This is going to be a bottom-up, grassroots thing, and there are tremendous benefits and blessings that will flow from it. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention and your amazing questions and your patriotism and your interest in building strong communities. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was awesome. I definitely feel edified for being here. And we are going to raffle off some gold backs right now. So for those of you who entered a little bit late, maybe there was a few people.
Is there a couple that came in late? Come and get your tickets.
While you're coming up and getting your tickets, I'm going to remind everybody of a couple of different things. First of all, the deadline to file for City Council is June 7th. We should all be looking around and trying to find people who you would like to see in our city councils, because there's lots of bad things that are going on there. The UN's reaching in, they are infiltrating our city councils. So June 7th, look around, see if you can find someone to run if it's not yourself. Secondly, our next event is going to be on the 12th of June, right here, 6:30 p.m. And we're going to have a Patriot Camp kind of evening where we're going to have the characters come dressed as George Washington, Henry Knox, and two others. And they will be telling stories, and it will be a fun evening. So bring your children, your grandchildren, bring your families, tell your neighbors. It will be a fun evening. And that's at 6:30 p.m. at this location. Are we ready?
Thank you.
Also, I want to thank Richard Palmer. This is all his doing. He brought Larry, and we are so grateful that Larry was able to take time for us. We will send the recording out to our email list. So if you are on our email list, if you didn't sign the email list, we've got it right here, so make sure you're on it. And you can share it with other people. This is important information. I'm sure you all can understand that.
All right. Rich asked me to read the numbers, and he's going to hand out the gold back. So how many do we have?
25.
25. The odds are good.
Let me tell you why. I really want people to grasp this. Everything, I wish we had more time with Larry. This is so important to get the government back to where they need to be. So that's why I'm doing it. Why is it important to me? Because I've seen what's happened to our money. I've seen what happens at the grocery store when I go to buy something. Our whole world is just, oh yeah, we're all joined at the hip on this stuff. So you've probably heard this before, where we go one, we go all, right? Okay, go ahead.
All right, first ticket here, we got 3853523. There you go.
Just read the last 3 digits.
I think the first few numbers are the same on everyone's ticket, so I'll just read the last 3. All right. 497. Winner, winner. 515. Bruce. Winner, winner. All right, we've got 526. 526. Anybody? Make sure it's not mine.
I told you you're out.
I was in. I put one in. It is me. It is me.
All right.
Okay. 526. 525. There we go. Happy birthday. 509. 509. Winner. 512. There she is. I'm not keeping track of how many I've counted, so you tell me when we're getting close. 493. In the back. 501. There, second row. 520. There, same row. 499. Awesome. 496. In the back. 524. There, congrats. Got 522. Tina, nice. 519. There we go. There we go, yes. 510. Right there, nice. 518. Back there in the back. 505. Right there, awesome. 498. Awesome. 506. 511. 504 in the front. 508 back there. 517. 517. 2 left. $495. $495 in the back. Last one. Drum roll. Okay. 507.
You see, yeah, you see this wallet right here? So this is yours, right? Yeah. So these work best in kind of where you don't fold them. Yeah, so it's best if you hold off on the folding.
50. And notice it's a little different in size. That's because there's 50 1/1000ths of an ounce in this. That's why they grow. Oh, I got my wallet from Alpine Gold.
So yeah, if you have questions, alpinegold.com. Just go to alpinegold.com. There's an office in Ogden, and one in Provo and Alpine and out Shane, I think, and yeah. So there's a number of them around the state. Yeah.
Tell them how many states are on.
In terms of series or? Yeah, in terms of goldbacks, really they are, so the question is how many states? They're legal in all 50 states because of the UCC, and they're issued as a, these are done with state series. So there's the Utah series, and then Nevada was the next, and they did New Hampshire, they've done Wyoming, South Dakota, and most recently Florida. And some of the older ones they're going to be totally redoing those. So if you have like some, they still have some like old Utahs or Nevadas or whatever. Those are going to be collector items. Yeah, and there's 2 more states coming up that would be, I believe, Arizona and Oklahoma. Yeah. Well, by the state that it is. Yeah, so you see out of Utah. Everything's totally interchangeable. Right. Yeah, that just kind of celebrates the history. Yeah, just to repeat that, if you go to goldback.com, you can look up the businesses that will transact, the daily rate. There's also a Goldback app on both the apps, the Apple App Store and the, what is it called, Google Play, yeah. So you can download that, and it will allow you to do, when you go and you transact with that, you can actually figure out real time what the exchange rate is, and it'll tell you what you'd should be receiving in change.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please join us again next time, June 12th. Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Richard. Oh, okay, Brian. Okay, everybody, just 1 second.
So on your way out, we are having our fundraiser for the Davis County Conservatives. We are having 3 events at the Kaysville Theater. First one will be on May 31st, and then 2 more on the June 14th, and then June 28th. We're going to be watching the original trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, starting with Episode 4, then Episode 5 on the second event, and Episode 6 on the second. The QR code on this flyer will take you to a Sign Up Genius link for ordering tickets, and then we are accepting payment in Venmo or Cash App, or if you want to order your tickets tonight, you can pay for them in fiat currency cash. Yeah, we'll send out the link in an email as well. Goldbacks, I'm sure we can negotiate something in that regard as well.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.